This is 100x Gaming. We are joined by the legendary Mike from Mojo Melee. I am pretty excited. I just met Mike like a couple of seconds ago, but I have grinded the heck out of Mojo Melee. It's one of the few games that I feel like I've actually played pretty extensively in the space. And if you've been listening for any amount of time, you've heard us say that like we are all about making Web3 gaming fun again. There was a season where everything felt like it was a pyramid scheme pretending to be a game. And we were so desperate for games that we could actually have fun playing. And this has been one of those games for me. So I'm stoked to sit down with Mike. Mike, can you introduce Mojo Melee, what you guys are building, the game, the whole world, the ecosystem?
Thank you for the kind words. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for believing I'm a legend, at least in my own mind. My mom tells me I am, so that's all.
That's right.
All that matters.
Before we dig into everything this episode has to offer, we want to highlight the awesome partners who sponsor this podcast and make it possible for us to work full-time on 100x. They're legends, and we appreciate them for supporting us. Astrobit is the king of automated trading, and now they've introduced a freemium model. Put those trading fees to use. How does it work? Sign up to an exchange with one of Astrobit's affiliate links and receive at least 30 free credits as a loyalty bonus. Then earn credits on your trading fees. The more you trade, the more credits you can generate. Use those credits towards trading bots and strategies. In other words, you can create a passive income stream at no cost. Find more deets in the description below. Let's talk about Reactor, a proof-of-work blockchain that introduces a brand new economic model, deep-in mining software, a gaming distribution platform, the RKR token, and their game, Minions of Steel, that's proving their thesis by seamlessly integrating proof-of-work token mining with gaming. Through allowing players to mine with their own GPU while playing, not only do they essentially make gaming free, they make software free, and they present an AI-proof income for everyone. If you want to take a glimpse into the future and get there early, explore Reactor's ecosystem at the link below. Crypto does not need to be complicated. Cadena is building the human layer of blockchain by giving the power back to the people and allowing them to build products that make a difference for humanity. Founded by ex-JP Morgan and SEC blockchain leads, Cadena develops easy-to-understand, human-readable tools and solutions that focus on the long-term development of the space, not just short-term gains. Simply put, if we want real, regular people to enter and enjoy Web3, Cadena is making a way. To learn more, check out Cadena.io, follow them on Twitter at Cadena_IO, or watch our episode with them.
Well, first, I guess, start with Planet Mojo, which is like our bigger vision of building this IP and around that, a Web3 interoperable gaming ecosystem. And that means giving benefit and value in one game, but eventually over time, a set of games that people can move these assets that they own. You know, this always seemed like when we got into Web3, one of the big benefits to gamers, right, for that Web3 can bring them is that now that you own these assets, well, you can take them into other games and explore kind of other, these things you've collected that you now own. Hey, if I won this axe in this game, can I use it in this other one, or a skin? And it's not always going to be that simple, and it's going to be really hard, we knew, in terms of like having a standard across all games. But we're like, hey, we can at least show people, a glimpse of this in our ecosystem. So that's kind of what we've been attempting and setting out to build. But we started out with Mojo Melee as our first game. It is our take on auto chess battlers, which is a fairly new genre. If people don't know about it, but most people know Teamfight Tactics, which is from Riot and very popular. It didn't really start the genre, but we had actually made a game in 2017 before. I always tend to gravitate toward bleeding edge tech for whatever reason. So before Web3, we were really into AR and VR, and we made an augmented reality game first for Apple and Google. It was Apple's game of the day, and we made it with Phil Tippett, so it was based on the holo chess scene in Star Wars. Yep. So we were just like, how do we
You're speaking my language, man. Look at I got Ahsoka right here. These are all Star Wars books. You can't tell behind my chair. There's about 150 Star Wars books on that shelf. You're speaking my language.
Oh boy. Well, we can go there if you want, but yeah, I only know my little sphere of Star Wars, and I haven't been able to keep up anymore once Disney took over. I'm
There's a
more
lot.
I'm more OG, but I have some good memories from those days. Yeah, so Mojo Melee, like we love TFT. That's kind of become the dominant,
Cool.
but it's a very new genre, and it's pretty normal with new genres. You see people trying new things and different things, and we just said, hey, like there's not really a mobile friendly version of this. The first time I played TFT was on mobile. I was like, wait a minute, the matches can take 30 minutes? Like that's just not a typical play pattern on mobile. It's more people are on the go, or you're watching TV or whatever you're doing, playing games. And so we wanted to have something that you could play quicker, but still had depth and strategy behind it. You could still play for a long time, but add in some of those sort of classic mobile mechanics from free to play in terms of progression and rank and battle passes and things like that. And we changed the genre up a little bit. Partly because just at the beginning, we're like, hey, this kind of makes sense for Web3 that you own these champions and our other characters and spellstones that you're playing with. And if you own them, maybe it's not a shared deck. Maybe we let the players kind of make their own metas beforehand and give all kinds of different combinations. And so it was kind of an experiment. I was like, hey, this is kind of working, and people were liking it. And then like Supercell started doing something similar. So we're like, hey, maybe we're on the right track here. So that was kind of the thesis. And, as we're progressing now, it's been out to play on web browser, WebGL. We're big proponents of that. But it's also out on Android. And really, we built it, like I'm saying, to be a mobile game. So we're kind of getting closer to that full mobile global release. It has been approved by Apple. It's out in I think 7 countries, soft launch. So
that was gonna be one of my big questions, because I've been playing on browser, and I got an iPhone, and I would play it a lot more if I could play it when I'm upstairs. And I mentioned off camera that I'm in the little kid season of life. So the amount of time I have to sit on my computer downstairs is not as often as hey, we're watching something as a family upstairs. Now I can whip that out and play.
I get it. All I can say is, without specifics, I don't think you'll have to wait too much longer.
Cool.
And if you want to move up to Canada, you could get it right now. So
I'll switch my VPN to Canada. I used to live up there for a minute. I didn't like it as much as the US.
VPN in. So yeah, that we're excited about that, and we actually have some pretty big announcements coming up really soon around the game and partnerships and helping us kind of spread it to other parts of the world. And the game, really has a tournament PvP aspect to it, obviously. And so obvious esports potential there without giving away too much. But it's something that we're always been excited to explore. And it was has been a great game for us to learn about Web3, explore different things, but really also build up our technology stack. So you're seeing all this stuff on the front end, but we've also been building this whole stack underneath it. We call it Sumatra. And, it's sort of us pulling together different APIs and SDKs and all kinds of things we've written and endpoints to sort of have everything that's happening now in the game. And it's gotten even more complex recently with our on-chain avatar system, this new game, Go Mojo, we've released, which you'll probably ask me about, which is great. And just tying that all together, we're about to unleash. Here's a little alpha for you. We're about to unleash. Everyone wants alpha.
It's hitting my veins.
Now that I've hit your expectations too high, but just we're gonna have it so at least on the web side of things, not mobile because that's different, but have a single sign-on. So you can just sign in the HTML, and then when you jump around to our different games, you don't have to sign into each one individually, which is kind of a pain in the butt. That's really what we want to get to, sort of, and you can even see how we've changed the homepage now a little bit, or the play.planetmojo.io. It's not just one game. Now we're trying to show that ecosystem vision. So there, I probably answered you and then some.
Yeah, I have a question here to build on top of that. I think it's really interesting because a lot of the times the games that we talk to about, or the games that we're seeing all over Twitter and all over our social feeds, are games that started in Web3, or that the idea started and began life in Web3. From the sounds of it, Planet Mojo and everything you guys have been building, it started before you guys even decided to hop into Web3, the blockchain. What was it about the blockchain that really enticed you guys to build in here? And how did that change you guys' approach to building out the entire ecosystem? Did you guys learn about the blockchain after the idea had already began? And how did that change along the way?
Yeah, no, actually, Planet Mojo from day one was built to be a blockchain project. You know, we got in. I don't know if you know the whole backstory, and I see you wearing your shrapnel T-shirt, but you know, I've been good friends with Mark Long for like 20 years, and we always talk occasionally, and we just caught up. Oh, what are you into? Oh, I'm looking at this too, and you know, he was kind of like a month ahead of me. With like, come on, like grab me by the lapels, and so we got into it pretty early. We were lucky, raised money through Animoca and other great funds at the beginning, Animoca brands, and yeah, we right from the beginning, you know, this whole first of all, just being in games a long time, you had a there's only certain times when original IP has a good path to be born, and it's usually when there's a new paradigm shift in gaming, a new console comes out, a new, you know, free to play, a new type of gaming emerges, and that sort of like the big IP don't want to play there then. So normally this is when you see new great IP being born. And so that was, you know, as with our team's background and my background and coming from LucasArts, like we love to create original worlds and IP and story and characters. And when we started this, just from the sort of lore side and narrative, right, this was the peak of metaverse craze, and we're all going to be living in metaverses in the future. And I've always, you know, been a big nature country guy, I guess, and so wanted to have that sort of a story about technology and nature and kind of what we're all living through as we sort of adapt to all these new technologies, basically. So that was kind of the premise of the story. And then, you know, in terms of how to actually integrate blockchain, I mean, that's been an ongoing journey, you know, and I think, you know, I've talked about this many times, but like the difference in this paradigm shift in gaming of the ones that I've seen in my career, which are, you know, a few, usually like a model emerges, you know, and it works and everyone copies it. And then you see derivatives and spin-offs and things like this, i.e. like Zynga and Farmville or free to play and Supercell and, you know, those kind of games. Here we had Axie, and by the way, I'm a huge Axie fan, so this isn't Axie bashing. But like everyone's just like, okay, this is the model. Here we go. And everyone raised all this money sort of based on this model, and then it was like, wait a minute, this actually might not work. And so now we're seeing, and you know, we honestly, I'm not patting ourselves on the back, but we never said play to earn in the beginning because it just didn't feel right to us. You know, we what did we say back then? God, like play to, can't remember now. That's the problem. We have no new standard acronym in this place,
right,
in this space now, and so and these little things are kind of important if you want to like bring the general public over eventually and pull them in. So yeah, I think like us and our integration of blockchain, we've always had the mindset of like we want it to be easy for the masses to come in, right? And when we were lucky enough to be one of the Web3 games that got to partner with Amazon Prime Gaming, and that kind of forced us to say, okay, well, that's nice talk, now you actually have to do it. You know, and so we partnered with Sequence, who's been a great partner. We put in a solution of their wallet. We tried to make, you know, we have minting directly in the game, and now we've kind of worked it into the overall play pattern of the game too, where, you know, it's a Web3 game. Apple's approved it. They probably have no idea that Web3 is in it. You know, the people who actually approve the apps, because it's not hidden, but it's in the background because we didn't want to sort of put it up in people's faces before they got a chance to like the game. So we treat it as more of this aha dopamine hit moment when you level up your characters to level 20. It's like, ta-da, you get a reward. Would you like to actually own this? You know, well, I don't have to pay anything more, so why not? So we're seeing most people adopt to that, just like in free to play, right? Most people aren't even reading. They're just like, yeah, sure, click, click, click. Hey, why not? It's blockchain, and we have to spin up wallets for people, and we do that right in the app. But we don't call them wallets, to Web2 people. We call them digital vaults and digital collectibles, and just trying to sort of get away from any stigma that those words had. But at the same time, we also realize we want to make the game as appealing and appetizing to the Web3 folks as well, right? And this was a big realization kind of post Amazon, and kind of like, hey, we know how hard it is to launch a Web2 game, right? Yeah. And it's even gotten harder. And it's like, wow, as we sort of look down the horizon of launching this as a Web2 game, it's like, well, wow, if we release this as a Web2 game and you don't get a huge hit in the community and whatever, if you don't have that foundation from Web3 of that community, if you let that go, which we already had, what do you have? Now you have nothing. And someone tweeted about this, and it really just hit a nerve with me. And I was like, okay, we need to look back before we look forward. You know what I mean?
Right.
And make sure everyone here, we're doing all the right things, because we need to make sure, the Web3 people are embracing what we're doing, getting all the feedback. And
you get that most devoted fan base before you go and try to capture the main audience.
And we had a lot of those. We have them, and they're always, we've been developing. I mean, the thing with Mojo Melee, we put it out very early. Like you said, we didn't see many playable games in this space. And one of the many things we love about Web3 is you can get a community early, you can put out a very early game and get feedback, and people aren't going to completely trash you. And so we put Mojo Melee out pre-alpha, I think, over a year and a half, 2 years ago, and we've been really constantly developing it, moving it into beta, open beta, starting to do full seasons with it on a regular basis. And that's not easy with a small team, doing live ops and doing all the Web3 stuff and building this back end and launching these new games we've been working on. So yeah, it's been a lot.
Yeah. I have a question. As you were referencing, a couple times early on, you referenced that interop ecosystem as a way that Web3 can make gaming better for the actual gamers. And you mentioned the animosity that gamers tend to have towards this space right now. There's a card game, a TCG that just launched recently in the space that got picked up by IGN with some negative light. And I saw the first comment on IGN's post on Twitter. This was last week, I think, that the top comment with hundreds of likes was, oh, I knew as soon as I heard they were using AI, they were going to be using those garbage NFTs, just dunking on the fact there's an NFT in it. And I was like, dude, I can't believe that is still
interesting with the AI NFT correlation, too.
Right?
We're pulling them in now. Okay.
Yeah, that perception is still there. And I think I remember when all of my friends who are not into crypto hated the idea of crypto gaming. And I've kind of won them over now. But I would say the average, maybe not the average, I don't know. But there are definitely a lot of people in traditional gaming that still don't see the benefit here. And I'm curious, how you guys, we talk about the reason I asked this question. This is something I'm thinking personally every time I'm looking at a new game, is this narrative that every crypto user talks about that is mass adoption. What's it going to take for mass adoption in crypto? The reason that I have devoted myself to the Web3 gaming space is simply because I feel like it is the most likely way that we see successful mass adoption, in that you don't have, like you guys are saying, you don't have to teach these new users about crypto. You just have to get them playing the game that exists.
Exactly. Suddenly we have millions of people on chain and on chain transactions.
One good game and you double crypto's user base.
And there's going to be a percentage of people who go deeper. And if people who don't want to, that's fine. I mean, I always make the analogy to just normal games, right? There's esports, there's tournaments, there's Magic the Gathering and Pokemon card tournaments for big money. But the average player isn't playing in those, right? They just want to play and have fun. So there's going to be some people who are like, oh, what is staking? Or after they learn the basics, want to go deeper and start learning about these things. So
your guys' approach is
Yeah.
Give that depth to the person who wants it. Otherwise, just let people play the game.
Yeah, the game has to come first if that's like the gateway we're bringing people in, right? I mean, back to what you were sort of talking about there with the stigma, and we have to realize again, this is like largely North America, Europe. Like at least we talk to other parts of the world; they seem more open,
More
and
open to it.
always been the way in gaming. East Asia paved the way for free to play, and we were stubborn, and then finally it was like, oh wow, it might be something here. But I think with this space, and I've talked about this so much, and I'm just gonna oversimplify it right now, but I think Web3 gaming and all that kind of hate or whatever we got or getting, it really just comes from NFTs. It's that goddamn simple. The whole legacy of that NFT movement, blame Beeple, Bored Apes, all these guys, okay? Because I shouldn't single them out because they didn't do anything bad per se, but you know what I mean? Like what happened in that space, the scamming, and just how it's all based on. And that still can be part of Web3 gaming, but I think that's what everyone heard about NFTs. And so when they hear Web3 gaming, I think their mind instantly goes to that stuff. And in our minds, I don't think it has anything to do with that almost. It's
right.
like, again, back to like the Web2 analogies. There are people who seriously collect Magic the Gathering and Pokemon cards, right?
My brother and my best friend. So
right, there is a collectible market out there for hardcore people who buy and sell these things, and they probably do have floor prices and all these things. So again, it's like it's for the people who are collectors can collect, but it shouldn't like just necessarily be the end all be all judge of the game, which is we're still living in a little bit of that right now. It's like, oh, you have a low floor price, the game is no good. It's like, wait, come on, like, have you played the game? Like,
yeah.
I think a part of that. Oh, go ahead, Caesar.
I have an interesting question here and I was talking to, I forgot who I was talking to, but we were talking about the idea of like, hey, floor price right now matters a lot. It's especially in gaming, because people see a low floor price. Oh, that game must be dying. Even though the game is thriving, there's still development going on. And I questioned them. I was like, why does a floor price really matter for a lot of these games? And they hit me with the idea of like, well, the Web3 aspect of it, the degen aspects of it are always going to be part there. And I question whether that's going to change, and I hope it does, as we continue to expand in the space. Right now, Web3 gamers are a very small part of gamers in general. If you look at the percentage of Web3 gamers compared to the totality of gamers, we're a very small part. So as these games, especially the ones that we really do feel like have a chance of becoming mainstream, like the Shrapnels, like the Parallels, like the Planet Mojos, the ones that we're really hoping do make it out, we're going to become the minority. Like the Web3 gamers, the Web3 communities are going to become the minority once millions of people are playing these games. And you talked about this a little bit at the beginning of this conversation, how you try to expand into that Web2 audience and felt like, hey, the sort of the incentives or the goals between the Web3 audiences and the Web2 audiences are very different. And you felt like, the Web3 users are your roots and you had to come back to them. How do you plan to balance that as you go forward, right? Like in the next couple of years, as you do start to expand and have those millions of people, how do you keep that core community, that Web3 that got you guys to where you guys are at today, still feeling like they're part of something when now you have a majority of Web2 users telling you to go a different direction?
Well, hopefully they won't necessarily be telling us to go a different direction, because I think, I'm probably overusing these Web2 analogies, but like you see Magic like balance this over the years, right? Where they're putting out like new cards and certain rare things that certain people want to get, but the sort of general player base is sort of happy still playing the core game. I mean, I'm not a hardcore Magic player, but sort of like they seem to have struck a good balance there. And I think like right now, like, cause we're in the early phases, like, yeah, like the scale is tilted, and these people, it's not like, I do totally agree. I think like I talk about this all the time, that the people in Web3, it's like these are new personas in gaming. We shouldn't shun them away, right? Like they do have a place in this ecosystem. And I think once the masses do come in, right, then they'll sort of, I don't want to say order will be restored, but I just said it, I guess. But like there'll be there'll be a balance, I think, and those people are still going to have power and validity, right? Because they're going to want to get the cool stuff, like you're always going to have those core, like, people always talk about the 1,000 core fans, and those people are going to, if you're lucky enough to have them, they're going to buy and interact with everything you do and purchase it and hopefully spread that out to 1,000 of their friends or 100 of their friends each, and so on and so on, kind of thing. So that is key, I think, to like always having sort of the base fun game, the entry point for people, but then, it's like, hey, there's this cool new super rare skin, and we've been trying to build like the foundation for that too, like with the Mojo Maker and things, where we can now introduce things that, you can acquire through in the seasons of the game. They're like limited time, so you have to work for them, and then like it's over and you can't get it unless you want to get it off the secondary, and it's like a limited kind of timed item, and it becomes very rare. And we've done this in our tournaments too, where I think we started with the golden mojos, and now we just did this with like the Chinese New Year stuff we did, and dragons and more. So like trying to sort of just seed these rare things out there. But yeah, it's like what we did with Amazon, and we knew this would happen. And that's why, like, when people just look at the floor price, right, they don't necessarily know the history and the context. And that's why it's one of the reasons we launched this ETH collection recently, because we just wanted something to sort of sit outside of our other collections, right? And what we did with Amazon going into that, we're like, whoa, like this is going to kind of blow up some of our collections, because we're going to be minting tens of thousands of NFTs to them. So, NFTs are all about supply, demand, small collections, and now suddenly we're just letting everyone mint. And so we always sort of foresaw this future where there's going to be like the game sort of generic NFTs that everyone can get to, again, i.e. the Magic starter packs kind of thing.
Right.
But then there's going to be you go deeper, and then you start to want to get these cool, rarer things and skins and champions that you couldn't get there and things like that. So that's kind of our mindset.
Yeah, I think that's solid. I have like a little bit of a left field question. You mentioned earlier about how you're like part of you guys wanting to build a new IP was that when you enter a space that is way more experimental, nobody knows it's going to work or not. It's like that's when you have the chance to launch an IP. So that's why one of the reasons you guys stepped into this space, and that your IP was like pretty nature meets tech inspired, because you're really into the outdoors. I'm curious,
and
like
tech.
How deep? What was that?
And tech.
And tech, yeah, exactly.
Kind of like that's my forever. Life, tech and nature, yeah.
And those are, hey man, I work in crypto full time, and if I'm not at the computer, I'm backpacking somewhere in the woods. So that's that's my world. And I'm curious, like how deep that lore goes. Do you guys have? Because I know right now, like I've only played the Auto Chess Battler, Mojo Melee, and so there isn't like a real in-depth storyline. I'm curious, do you guys have plans for deep lore and what that looks like?
Yes. Dying to get back to that. We have lots of plans, and we're actually, here's another little alpha. We're going to be adding VO, hopefully fully, to Mojo Melee before it releases, which we did some tests and definitely spices things up. So it just gives you more of a sense of who these champions are, because like we hear them in our heads, but like,
yeah, exactly.
And we, if you poke around, and this is one thing that attracted us to Web3 at the beginning, at least on the story narrative side, because there's all the other stuff too I'm attracted to as well in terms of business and financial and all that stuff. But like, and looking back at it, maybe this is a little bit in nature of like when we got into it that there weren't any games, but I thought it was really cool how people were telling their lore and stories through different mediums. Like it wasn't just like, here's a cinematic or here's a comic book. It was like, here's some text on the website, and you can like Parallel is a good example. Like you could read about all the different, I can't remember what they call them, the different factions.
Clans.
Thank you.
Yeah, factions.
Right. And I was like, ooh, this is kind of cool. And Star Atlas, same kind of thing. And so it's sort of like a multimedia story-based approach. So if you hunt around, like we did quite a bit of that in the early days. I mean, there's still if people want to go look up peopleinvestigatingplantaliens.org, you might find some weird things there. And Brooko, one of the main champions, he had a very active Twitter account for a while where he was tweeting.
That's crazy. So that would have been before I was playing the game.
Yeah, he lost his phone though. I think, I don't know. He hasn't been tweeting recently. I think he lost his connection. But yeah, like this story, it was definitely meant to be told sort of like what's a good analogy of another? It's a story that gets told over time and will reveal itself more. So we are really dying to kind of move to this next chapter because, yeah, there's so much more about Planet Mojo we haven't told people, and we kind of want to take that to the next level. So, yeah, I think more of that is coming in different forms. We've actually been having some talks about that. We just had to get through some major milestones around here, and now we're in a good position to kind of dig back into that.
That's awesome. I really like it. It reminds me, I know this is like to the gamers out there are going to shun me. I have played way too much Fortnite. I know that's not like, it's popular with little kids, and then I'm the adult that's playing it. But I have...
You're not alone.
Yeah, there was a season where I was very addicted to it. Don't play as much right now. But it's cool how like with their world, it is very clearly not a story-based game, right? But there is all of these elements happening behind the scene when they're changing the map that like does have a story. And you can actually, if you seek it out, you can find this world that's being woven between everything. It sounds like that. Are you guys going to do, is that like the plan with the storytelling, or do you see, I know you've mentioned, I don't want to dive too deep into unreleased alpha, but I know you've mentioned like part of your goal is this interoperable, lots of different games in the same world. Do you think any of the games you guys release will go more story heavy, or is it more intended to be like a background element for the people that really care?
If you saw the new Untitled tease we put out, the Unreal game, yeah, that has a lot more potential for story in it, and something we've been talking quite a bit about because it's really a journey and something we see potentially, becoming sort of our flagship project over time. But even Mojo Melee has a path towards story. We've really, like, again, we're like, I'm still like in this extended chapter 1. We're introducing new characters. We've been introducing new locations slowly, new arenas. But yeah, I mean, we've talked about adding a story mode in there actually quite a bit. We almost did it, then we didn't, but a PvE mode. And we just, when we do it, we want to make sure it's sustainable,
Right.
And, I think like some games put up a PvE and it's just like, okay, I'm going to repeat this.
It's there for like 3 months and then it goes away.
It's the exact same thing. Yeah. And so we wanted to, if we're going to start you on a journey, we want you to be able to continue with it.
Speaking a little bit more on the paradigm shift and how you mentioned again at the very beginning of the conversation how there's no playbook, right? Like in regular games, everyone has a playbook. They follow the free to play, the battle pass. Everyone already sort of knows what to do when they want to launch a game and at least try to make it successful. In Web3, we have seen that, like you said with the Axie example, there's really no clear path forward. And I would still argue that we still don't know the clear path forward and how it's going to look a year from now, 2 years from now. I mean, how much has it changed in the last year and a half to where we see gaming today? With that idea in mind, how do you balance the not knowing how to move forward, but also seeing how everyone else is moving around the space, like your peers, the other games that you respect, and the decisions that they're making in order to keep things advancing? Like, I know you guys just finished your Play to Airdrop. That's a hot narrative that we've seen over the last couple months that last year wasn't around. How do you balance those decisions to ensure that, hey, this is going to be the best thing that we can do moving forward and not something that a year from now you may look back and say, maybe we should have waited a little bit longer?
I like this. You guys asking different questions, making me think a little bit here. This is good. I mean, look, when I first got into this, I won't say his name, but because he's too important, but an important person in this space probably gave me the best advice I got, which was just, and I should listen to this more because as you get into it, it's like a trap, but that if anyone tells you they're an expert in Web3 gaming, just run the other direction, and the longer we get into this, there are people who, oh, well, hey, we had a successful mint and now I'm an expert, like I can tell you how to do this. But the problem in Web3 is we've all figured out, right, is that what worked last week isn't necessarily going to work this week. And so it's constantly evolving, it's constantly changing. And, we've been lucky recently just to have great partners we've worked with and a great team. I should give them more credit too for all the stuff we've been doing. But on the Web3 side, just really tried to align ourselves with the best partners, Wolves and others, to really have a gut check for us. It's like, is this going to go over well if we say this? Like, just getting some kind of advice, how are people going to feel about this or this approach, I think has been critical over the last few months. But again, you kind of, at the end of the day, and this is advice I got way back when I started, being an entrepreneur, I guess, in startup, is someone said to me, no one knows your business but you. End of the day. It's just too intricate. And so you can talk to all these different people and get advice, really smart people, but unless they're going to spend days with you on the phone, knowing every nuance and subtlety, ultimately you're the rudder, right? And your team and maybe a few key people you really trust. And I think it is a combination of doing what you feel is right and sticking to your principles, but at the same time, not being blind to what's going on in the outside world. Like, if someone is just having incredible success doing something, you might want to pay attention to that, or at least understand why they had that success. And like for me, when we got into this space, like actually was the first thing, like I really studied. This is like, what is this? What are tokenomics? How do you integrate them into the game? But like, that's something we constantly do. We're constantly looking at other games, and especially these days, tokenomics, and just like, hey, how's Parallel doing this? How's Big Time doing this? How's Shrapnel doing this? And we might look at it and go, that's weird. Like, we don't agree with that part. Or, and what I tend to do is say, hey, try to pull what we think are the best pieces from different projects. Like, hey, if we could combine doing this, what they're doing with this and our own original ideas, like, wow, that's kind of, I don't know, how you kind of think come up with your own original spin on things.
And just a little follow-up question to that. How do you think we get to that playbook, to that sort of, to quote you again from earlier, that sort of order to this chaos that we have? How do we get to that in Web3? Do you feel like we need to take more sort of inspiration from Web2 in the ways that things have been built? Or is it just like, hey, we're going to have everyone trial and error a lot of things, see what works and navigate through there? Or where do you see ourselves in a couple years, and how do we get there?
Sure. I mean, it's two things really, right? One, just really simply, we just need better and more games, right? So as those come out and people get to play those first and foremost, that's going to be like one factor here, just sort of forgetting about the crypto part. And then we get back to what we're talking about at the beginning. The other part is the UI, the UX, like how is this going to go down? What's the preferred flow? I think that's where we're going to see, we're already seeing mass experimentation. And, it's not also just the UX. It's like, what protocol are you on? What chain? How are you dealing with bridging? And, you start to get into these deeper crypto concepts because you can't kind of avoid them ultimately, depending on where you decide to put your tent up, right? And it's like, oh, well, I'm here now, I have to deal with all this stuff. Like, because this is like the Web3 people or even the Web2 people who want to get their stuff out of here, right? If you're in certain ecosystems or things like that. So yeah, it's there's a lot of complexities to it. I think like we're just gonna see hits and success. And what's happened before in Web3 in normal gaming, like I said at the beginning, is normally when you see success, it's just like pack rats, everyone's just going to gleam onto it. And that doesn't mean that's the best approach. Because like, back in the day of Facebook games, I remember being at GDC here and talks about it. Like Zynga would literally like move a button or change the color. And you would see the 10 other Facebook companies like just do the same thing. And they wouldn't know why. Well, they must know something with data and analytics. And so, but then like someone does think different and do something innovative. Oh, wow. And then it totally works. hey, and then that becomes a trend. Gaming is very trend driven, as you can see in normal games, right? And there's not often originality and risk is not rewarded in normal gaming. That's changing more, right? It was just on the Spaces yesterday talking about this, the rise of indie games, and
I feel like part of that is because we hit on earlier like the way that gamers are so upset about NFTs, and I think the reason they're so upset about it is because gamers have become conditioned to essentially being taken advantage of. Anyone that's like a regular gamer, you've been screwed over by one of your favorite AAA studios that like I bought something that I was so excited about and they just delivered me a trash product. Like we've all got that story of like our favorite game and the next one came out and it was like, what did you do to this? You're the predator now. And I think that's like something that every gamer has experienced.
Gamers feel entitled and
yeah, there's a mix of gamers feel entitled to perfection and they forget that it's human beings building games. And then there's these really large corporate games that essentially strip away all of the thing that made the game fun just to sell you a package. And now we're in a space where there's a lot more ingenuity. And I think that's part of why like indie gaming is on the rise, because gamers just got sick of like the same 10 IPs being regurgitated back at them, which leaves a little more room for guys like you who are building not just a new IP, but in an entire new, like, I don't know how you would define Web3 gaming, like a whole new sector of gaming itself. And I think there's more room for that. I'm curious. I usually would have asked this, but we went right into the fun stuff. You mentioned that like piece one of solving this puzzle of Web3 gaming becoming worth something and there becoming a playbook is just fun games. So you guys are obviously in the business of fun games. We've used that phrase a handful of times.
Yes.
You have Planet Mojo, Mojo Melee. You guys are Planet Mojo. You have Mojo Melee.
Yes.
You have Mojo Run. You have the new
Go Mojo.
Go Mojo. That's what it is. You have the new teased action RPG.
Untitled.
That looks
Unreal.
Really good. I would say like my genre preference, to me, that looks like the best thing you guys have presented so far. What if I'm a gamer listening to this right now, what should I go play?
Well, you can play that one, but maybe soon. But it depends what kind of gamer you are, right? I mean, I should say you should play them all, right? Experience Web3 interoperability firsthand. Why would you not want to do that? Like Go Mojo it's an endless runner, though it's not actually endless. So we always it's a runner. But it's very much like Subway Surfers.
Has anyone reached the end?
I don't know. I'm pretty sure. Some may have cheated to get there, though. But there's all kinds of variants, even if you reach the end, in terms of the points and boosters and multipliers and benefits. But we wanted to put that out, one, to show the interoperability, because we built this avatar maker and kind of build out that system. And also just as we've been developing Mojo Melee a long time, we've sort of just realized this kind of game, certain kind of players are attracted to it, specifically PvP games in general. Not everyone wants to play those. And auto chess then is like a niche of a niche, right? Because it's like more people are playing MOBAs or whatever they're doing. So we wanted something that was a little more just casual, that anyone could jump into, especially knowing what we had coming up, like you said, with the play to airdrop. We wanted something more sort of mass market. And runners, if you think about it, I say they're sort of like the mobile equivalent of FPSs, because like it's just like a universal language. Everyone knows dodge, jump, tap, duck, right? And so everyone could just instantly play it, and it was fun. And we may put it out as a mobile app someday, but our focus again will first be to release Mojo Melee as kind of our first core game, because that's much more fully fleshed out. Go is really fun and challenging, but I wouldn't say it's like a complete finished free to play product that we could put out in the market yet. It's close, but it's probably more in like a late alpha to beta state.
Do you guys have like currently plans on the back end for more than those 3 games? Or is it more like, hey, someday we'll introduce more games in this interop ecosystem? Or do you guys have like a fleshed, hey, we're not announcing it, maybe not for a couple of years, but like we have storyboarded different genres or different games?
Yeah, without giving that too much away there, certainly have a bunch of other games we would like to put out and release, some that could be done much quicker than others, others that will take longer amounts of time. And as we expand, one thing we've always wanted to do over time is ultimately have an SDK. I mean, that's again sort of, I think, part of the nature of Web3 and letting people who, take these NFTs and create other things out of them and things that we can ultimately get behind and have sort of a program where we're showing the best things that our audience can create, with our IP and other things. And so, yeah, and the Mojo Maker is also something we've broken out now as a separate app. It's not a game, but we just figured, hey, if you just want to dress up your Mojo or mess it around. But this is something I think, it's a little bit of a Trojan horse that people probably aren't noticing. We were talking about it yesterday, though, again, on that space, is that, like, where is social fi going? And, like, is it just going to be like what it is now and retweeting and just total spamming versus, like, giving players, right, these sort of UGC engines? And if you look at what Mojo Maker is right now, and you start to think about where that can go, because right now you're just saving your Mojo and it saves it as an NFT.
Right.
But the possibility of like you having unique animations there, your own choice of different backgrounds, adding in AI to the mix, tinting, and just more types of options where people can really make things their own, and then sort of use that in a social fashion, like, it really could be a social media type of machine if used correctly. So something we're thinking about a lot too.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the Bitmoji of Web3 gaming at that point.
There you go.
Yeah, and that hasn't been done. So maybe you guys will be the ones to do that.
Call. I love Bitmoji.
I got to update mine. I haven't used that in a while. It had long hair and a man bun because I used to have that.
That was the Snap one, right?
Yeah, it was for Snapchat.
Yeah. I haven't.
I mean, I think they used a lot more than Snapchat, but yeah.
Yes,
and it was,
you're right.
But that was so successful. Again, you're talking about niches. I think one thing that we're maybe missing out on in the Web3 gaming space is recognizing that, like, anyone that's ever built anything knows at some point you really need to niche down to build a core audience, and then you can expand. You guys have niched down in multiple sectors. And I think that's like one area that nobody's really niched down in. There is a whole, maybe that's like, if you look at the demographics, maybe this is a little tangent off to the side, but if you look at demographics, we're just targeting, for the most part, like dudes in gaming. But if you think about like, hey, what's this subset of like 40% of gamers right now are girls? I met my wife playing Call of Duty. Like I've said that before. How do we target that audience? Bitmoji was a 90% girls using Bitmoji. Get them excited. We just had Collab Land on, if you know who those guys are. Not quite gaming space, but we just had the husband and wife duo. James is like one of the OG guys from Farmville. And Angelique is like his wife. She was talking about like the things that were all community based and things like exactly that. Like that's how you tap into another demographic that you need to pull into Web3. I think it's interesting.
Give them props, like Play Ember. I saw yesterday. I just like what they're doing with their characters and integrating the AR, which we have a lot of experience with too. So I immediately was like, wow, that's cool. And how they're already have it integrated with Instagram and TikTok, which you didn't used to be able to do when we were doing so much AR. We had to like really work hard to do that. So now all this stuff is possible, and there's so many cool things like we can do with that. So yeah, I think it can be really exciting. Like, and you add in the AR aspect too, people can really get creative with this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. All right, 30-second plug-in of how does you mentioned you were doing Go Mojo specifically for this like airdrop campaign. How does that Mojo token, you're building all these different games, what does that have to do with the Planet Mojo gaming ecosystem? Like, where does it plug in?
Yeah, I mean, the token, which we're working with our foundation on, is really meant to be the lifeblood of this ecosystem. It's something that our community can rally around as a symbol. That's why, we didn't really approach this before it came out with any kind of sales tool or anything like that. It was a community really marketing event for us. And that's what we've really been doing, is just giving this away to empower the community. And, we just rolled out the utility where you can use it now in our marketplace. Soon you'll be able to use it in our shops, but there's going to be a lot more coming that you can do with it and sort of have it integrated throughout not only just the games, right, but sort of outside experiences that then permeate through the games that you can kind of maybe have fun little activities with, and crafting and those kind of things, and then have those kind of benefits that you could then use throughout the games.
That's sweet. So it's like, it's just the piece that's connecting all of these games together.
Yeah. I mean, even with Go Mojo, when we put it out, I never talk about this part because I was talking about the Mojos, but, we have our hard currency, our Web2 hard currency that's in Mojo Melee that people have accumulated a lot of. You can use that in Go Mojo to buy boosts and power-ups and all these different things. So we wanted to sort of, crack the door and show like the possibility with that before the actual real token was out.
Yeah, that's rad. To me, you're just testing out all of these. You used that phrase a few times early on of like better for gamers. And I think if you guys are successful at what you're striving to do, like part of the reason I'm so bullish on this space is because I play a lot of games. And I think that Web3 gaming actually is the better route for gamers. And so I'm excited to see how you guys essentially prove that, like, hey, these things are better for gamers than the alternative that you've been stuck with for the last 20 years as gamers.
Well, and it's not just gamers, to be selfish. It's better for developers too, right? And that's when I got into the space. You can probably Google it somewhere on Medium, but I wrote a piece about like why I thought Web3 gaming was cool. And I think most of it I still believe. It was like 3 years ago at this point. But no, I think most of the principles still hold true. And again, I always say it's about one word. It's about empowerment. And it's empowering not just the players, which we've been talking about, and that's equally important here, but just to focus on the developers for a second, because we need us to make those good games.
Yeah, exactly.
And look what's happened over the last, especially 6 to 12 months in gaming. Like, look how this is playing out, right? I've been saying for years, Web2 gaming is broken. Right. From a business model. It has serious problems. It's completely, generally, as much as we love these indie stories, it's generally dominated top down, by the few dominant titles recurring. It's, you hear these this is what I was arguing with Jonah about on the Spaces, is he's like, indie gaming, it's taken over. Among Us is, one of the most powerful IPs in gaming. I'm like, slow down. It made a niche for itself. And yes, we are seeing slow progression. And I made an indie game when the term didn't even exist, right? When we made this game. So I can see the progression, but, don't you walk up to the average, person, these giant mega franchises still dominate for the most part. And I think, we're hopefully going to see that start to topple. That's what, I think people are hungry for new just stories and ideas. But on the Web3 side, this empowers developers to find new funding sources, to have community early, to get feedback. There's a lot of benefits to sort of breaking out of the current structure, which is, as an indie, is, sort of by hook or crook. There's not really great paths to true empowerment in Web2 gaming. You're going to have to work with a publisher. You're going to have to do tons of service work and put all your profits into this one idea and hope that, there's a lot of risk involved. There always is. There is here too, of course, maybe even more. But
and I think you tapped into it early on when you said like, hey, you stepped into like the VR and AR space when that was like cutting edge. The reality is when you're willing to step into the cutting edge, it's going to be a smaller pool. And so I think that's obviously a piece of the puzzle. At some point, when some of you guys win and establish new IPs, Ubisoft and EA and everyone else is going to come and step into this. Usually they're just not the ones willing to experiment.
They're not. They're risk averse.
They don't need to. So once the experimentation has been done, they can step into the circle. And that leaves room for like new Davids to, maybe not Goliaths. You don't want to evolve into a Goliath, but new Davids to win their battle at least. So
Yeah. No, totally agree.
Cool. Mike, this has been a pleasure. I told you before we started 30 minutes, and we are 22 minutes past that.
Wow, that
I
went
have been
fast.
enjoying picking your brain. If people listening right now are getting excited about Planet Mojo, the world you guys are building, where is the best place for them to connect with you guys, maybe to engage with you guys? Where should they go immediately following this episode?
Well, easiest thing to remember is go to planetmojo.io. And from there, you can kind of have jumping points to follow us on Twitter, join our Discord. That's where, you're going to get most of the information. But I'll add to that, of course, if you want to just dive right into the games, you can go to play.planetmojo.io. And you'll see Mojo Melee there. You'll see GoGo Mojo. You have to create an account. As I said, soon we'll have that single sign-on, so it'll be easier. But you can create an account right now in HTML or any one of those games and dive right in and start playing.
Beautiful. You can find those links here. And I'll say, I've not been able to take part in what is it called? The Mojo Melee. I've only played the 1v1s. There's the other mode that is like a bunch
Melee
of
mode.
people.
Yeah, we have duel and melee. Yep.
So if you're listening and you want to fight in a melee, I've wanted to take part in one of those. Haven't done it yet.
Oh boy.
Hit us up. Would love to play. Throw some hands.
We're going to get you ready for our next tournament.
Oh, I need to get in. Yeah. So if you want to play the tournament, jump in. We'll put a link down here so you guys can get involved with that. Awesome, Mike. Thank you so much. This has been a blast.
Thanks for having me, guys. Good combo. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.